All right, hello everyone. Welcome to a discussion of R. Scott Baker's The White Luck Warrior. This is book 7. Is it 7? No. Sorry, 5. Book 5 in the Second Apocalypse series, book 2 of the Aspect Emperor tetralogy, which is the second part of the Second Apocalypse series. Well, that's so complicated, right? But anyway, we are here. I'm here with Johanna to talk about this, and I had the pleasure of speaking with her on her channel a little while ago about the first book in Aspect Emperor, The Judging Eye. And we are continuing our buddy read of this series, The Second Apocalypse. We had previously read the first 3 books in Second Apocalypse, which is also called the Prince of Nothing trilogy. And we to discuss those along with Raph and Jimmy, and those videos are out there too. I have everything in my Bakker playlist if you're curious. So we are here now. Joanna, what are your general, and first of all, thank you for being here. It's lovely to see you as always.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to talk about this book.
Yay.
General impressions, I loved this book.
Yeah.
It took it to a new level for me. I thought The Judging Eye was a masterpiece personally,
Hmm.
and I think this book might have surpassed The Judging Eye for me.
Wow.
I found it so fascinating. I think the last half of the book I read within a few days because I just got sucked into the vortex, so to speak. It was truly incredible. There's a lot to unpack, though.
Oh, I agree with everything you just said. It is, I think, my favorite book in the entire Second Apocalypse so far. And it still has some of the stuff that I found to be challenging about this series, which I actually like. So that's not a negative at all. But it is a bleak and difficult world. I do think maybe we'll talk about this as we talk about the individual arcs in here. I felt like they were just hints maybe of characters, just whatever. Maybe we don't have any free will, but we're just going to act like maybe we can have some and empower ourselves with some decisions here. So maybe we'll talk about that. But I am curious about a couple things before we get into these. There are 3 main narrative threads throughout here, as in the previous book that we're going to talk about. There's the slog with Akamian and company. There's the Esmenet part, which is in Momin. And then there is the Great Ordeal itself, where Sorgwheel is the main POV. So we'll talk about each of those in turn, but I'm curious about a couple things. First of all, Baker does some interesting things. He's immensely talented, and he keeps changing things up a little bit here and there. Narratively, like his narrative perspective, sometimes, as you observed before we started recording, sometimes he will zoom out and will give a just sort of an omniscient perspective that doesn't follow any particular POV. I've also noticed that particularly with Mimara, who is Esmenet's daughter, and she's with Akamian and company, he will switch from past tense to present tense, just
Hmm.
out of nowhere. Suddenly, I think it's Mimara. I noticed it in The Judging Eye, and I thought, okay, let's see if he does it here. And I noticed that he does it with Mimara, particularly, but not always, but particularly when her Judging Eye opens. He will switch from past to present. So I was wondering what you thought of any of that, just his tendency to switch things up, narratively in here.
Yeah, I didn't quite notice it as much with Mimara, but now that you say it, I can imagine that was the case. I'll have to go
Yeah,
back and reread those parts now.
yeah,
But I did notice it with the Great Ordeal battles towards the end of the book when we had like sorcerers flying in the sky and all this fighting of strengths. It felt like you said, like we are kind of zoomed out and taking on more of an omniscient perspective, though at times I wasn't totally sure if we were omniscient or closely following one of those characters, but it felt more omniscient to me. And it reminded me a lot of the battle scenes in Thousandfold Thought, the third book in the original trilogy.
yeah. Yeah, it's funny because there are very few things that I can say in terms of Baker's writing that don't work for me, because I just think he's just so immensely talented, and he even gets away with a few things that very few people could, such as the large amounts of exposition in there. But I will say that his battle scenes often fall a little flat for me, mainly because he does that zooming out thing, and he's talking about all these different characters who I don't even know who they are. He's talking about we're no longer with Sorgwheel or with someone that I actually care about that I'm invested in. He throws out all these names from these different places, Duke so and so from so in this place, and I don't care because I have no idea who these people are. So I felt like that was in a way a bit of a miss. What he's doing successfully there, though, is conveying just the scale of this. There's just this massive confrontation, this huge war going on, the Great Ordeal, and there's just gajillions of Srunk, and I keep wondering, are we ever going to get a Srunk POV? They just seem so othered, so animalistic, so just pure lusts, and I wonder. There's so many things that Baker does subvert in this series, and there's this constant. We have to talk about the constant stream of Tolkien allusions, and he's just
Yeah.
completely subverting stuff, and in a way that I think is probably affectionate more than anything else, but definitely subversive. But yeah, the battles, I feel like the Sronk are more or less. I haven't seen any signs that they're any more. There's any more sympathy being evoked for the Sronk than there would be for like orcs, which Sronk are basically Baker's orcs, I guess. So, but anyway, I don't. Do you have any thoughts on any of that before we talk about all the Tolkien nods?
No, yeah, I that's a good point. Whenever I read those zoomed out battle scenes, I did this when I read Thousandfold Thought, and I can understand that there are probably some big Baker fans who really follow all the nitty-gritty details of all the
Yeah,
factions and all the kings and all the various places and peoples of this world. And
right.
I as a reader didn't quite hold on to those details when I was reading it. I more took it as a feeling of atmosphere
Yeah,
than I did, I need to remember all these people. I need to remember this man who's fighting this man or this sorcerer. I took it more as, okay, there are these various schools and there are these various leaders, and this is the atmosphere of a war and the great ordeal. So I tried to even take the more macro perspective of those macro perspectives rather than trying to get zoomed in and attached in that way. I don't know that Baker was really necessarily trying to get you attached. I don't think that was really what he was going for anyway.
that's
So
right.
I just took it as I'm not necessarily meant to be attached. I'm more just meant to understand this as adding depth to the world. Because I still think, even though I'm not zoomed in, remembering or memorizing every single title or detail or place, it still gives me, even on a subconscious level, this sense of depth to the world and
Mm.
how much it's been lived in. It feels very lived in. It feels very historical. It feels very thought out in that way. So that's how I read it.
I think that's great. I think you said some great things there. It also evokes a very old epic feel, which is clearly what he's going for in those moments, like the Iliad and Odyssey and that kind of thing, where they'll list off these kings on this side of the battle and those kings on the other side and blah blah blah. So yeah, cool. And as far as Mimara's the shift from past tense, which most of the writing is in past tense. She will shift to present tense for some reason when it's Mimara, particularly when she opens her judging eye. And I feel like that of course one of the things about using present tense is it does lend a kind of immediacy to the situation, but it also emphasizes the shift in her perspective in that moment that she's literally seeing from a different eye here, her judging eye, and that changes things up. Although, again, he does use it sometimes even when she's not seeing from the judging eye. So, maybe I'm wrong about that, but
Mhm.
I thought it sounded good anyway. So,
No, I always wonder about that, like how much of that is a conscious choice. I imagine it was, if it did happen
it has to be, I
consistently.
think. Yeah.
hmm And that makes sense because the veil is being removed, so to speak, and she's seeing things in a much more detailed, clear way,
Yeah.
possibly a psychic way. So,
Yeah. Cool. All right. Nice. So the Tolkien, before we get into the three main narrative threads here, I want to talk about all the Tolkien nods because you and I are both big Tolkien fans, and I also recognize that what Baker's doing is very subversive, but I do feel it's affectionate at the same time. But when you look at Baker's version of Lembas, for example. It's just essentially the Kiri, which is a drug, of course. This is Baker's world, right? It's a drug. It's not just this wonderful elvish, thing that sustains the characters and gets them through the hard times, it has all these really negative repercussions, and it becomes really quite a part of the story, much more than the Lembas, really. It's what do you say? I want to get your take on this. What does Baker achieve by making the Kiri so central to the Akamian narrative, that part with Akamian and Mimara, and emphasizing the drug-like nature of it, the addictive qualities to it, the the indifference that Akamian and Mimara feel as a result of being addicted to this drug. All they care about is their fix for the Kiri. How did that affect your take on this particular part of the book, and why do you think Baker went for it that way?
It made sense because I can see how that drug was helping them survive on some level, helping them to push through limitations at the same time as obviously being addicted and having the negative repercussions of that. But I also think it's a way in which Mimara and Akamian were like they were tricked. They were tricked into thinking that they were the ones in control. They were the ones who were leading leading the journey, that they were the ones, yeah, they thought that they had the upper hand, and it turned out they really didn't at the end of the day.
No, no. Yeah. And you see his version of Mirkwood in this book
Ah,
as
the
well.
mop.
The
The
mop.
mop.
He calls it the
Yes.
mop. I mean, just the name of it is subversive.
That's
It's
so
mop.
I didn't think of Mirkwood. That's so funny. That's
Yeah.
so funny. Yeah.
Oh, the whole time I was there, I was like, okay, Baker, thanks for ruining Mirkwood too. So, I mean, it's just so, and of course, he has his Smaug in here, doesn't he? At the
Didn't
end.
realize.
I mean,
Oh,
it's the
yes, yeah. Oh,
dragon.
yeah, 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 the
Yeah,
dragon. Yes.
yeah.
Oh,
But
yeah. Right away, I
his
was
Smaug is this undead, rotting creature in,
100%.
yeah,
That you can't fail to see.
yeah.
Absolutely.
It just was not just the fact that there is a dragon waiting,
Mhm.
it's the dialogue
The
between,
dial yes. I'm
yeah,
like, the dragon talks, like, how much more Hobbit-like can you get here? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
That
I
was
can't fault Baker for that because hey, I ripped off Tolkien and myself for a dragon talking soon scene. So
oh, yeah, that's true too, huh?
yeah. But I do like I really kind of enjoying these Tolkien nods slash subversions, I
I
guess.
think I also messaged you when I read the scene when,
Yes.
Mimara sneaks off to see the skin eater, and then when she or skin spy, and when she comes
Comes
back,
back.
full of a girl, and I was like, "Full of a took," like, that was just immediately what
Yeah.
came to my mind. I don't know if that
Full
was
of a
on purpose.
girl. Yeah. Sad Gandalf speaks again. Akamian. Poor guy. So yeah, I feel like a lot of those Tolkien nods are in the Akamian section, the Akamian Mimara section, more so than in the other two sections. But they're just they're big. I think I probably look forward to that particular part the most as I was reading for some reason. I don't know why. But all three were handled really well. All three of the main narrative threads that are going on here. So, do you have anything else you want to talk about before we get into those?
Oh, let's go ahead and dive in. Yeah,
Okay, cool.
ready.
So we've been talking mostly about Akamian and Mimara, so why don't we just go ahead and start with that and the rest of the what were they called? Skin eaters? Yeah, skin
The
eaters.
skin eaters, and then we get the skin hags that come along.
The
Um,
yes, the hags and as it turns out they don't last particularly long, but yeah.
nope.
But yeah, they're much reduced in number, decimated almost even, I think. AP would correct me here because it's probably not exactly 1/10 the number that used to be there, but something like a tenth or so. I mean, they're reduced to a very small company, what they were because of what they went through in the previous book, and in the Judging Eye, going through Kill Algus and all that, which was Baker's
Mines of Moria.
Mines of Moria,
Yeah.
exactly. But here we are now with some of these skin eaters really have some great personalities, I thought, in here. What were your thoughts on the skin eaters? Could be Sarl, could be the Slog of Slogs and all that. I thought that he was brilliant. Or the captain, who's as it turns out, mortal in here. But also they're being followed by the skin spy and all of that. So any thoughts on any of these personalities that we followed
Oh,
along?
I thought they were all crazy and fun to follow. I'm trying to think of the right word to describe them, unhinged, especially Sarl. I loved Sarl's character. I thought he was very humorous. They were just a bit absurd. And
Yeah.
they're all pretty despicable in some way. And I found them all the more interesting whenever Mimara has moments with the judging eye opening up, and she
Right.
has these moments of compassion for them. But the
Yes.
compassion is always, it's always within the lens of, I see that they're damned. So it's
Yeah.
compassion, but more like, oh, they're damned, like damnation.
Yeah.
And
Even when Galleon is about to rape her, she sees him through the judging eye and says, "I forgive you." I mean, that was
yeah,
something. I thought, wow. So yeah, I thought that was deep. That was pretty. We'll talk about that a little more when we
yeah,
do talk about Mimara, but these guys were completely unhinged. Sarl was just almost it's like it's a puppet with its strings cut,
yes,
and he keeps
yes,
saying the same ridiculous things again and again, and everyone just sort of ignores him, but he's there, and he's I thought it was so appropriate that he was the only one left at the end and just sitting there with Cossiter's head saying the slogs, we really did it, boys, it's just really something, and they just leave him, uh,
yeah.
so
I love the imagery too of he ties his hair to his beard and it's like
yeah,
hanging down. It's just the wildest imagery.
that
I
was
just
crazy.
imagine Sarl as being, for the most part, just kind of like muttering, and then you look over at him and he just starts laughing, ha ha, no weeping on the slog, or
No, we
just so
got a slog.
crazy.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I mean, what a memorable character, but Cossiter
yeah,
himself as well. Very interesting stuff I thought Baker was doing with this character. The idea that he's a believer. And why is he a believer? It just seems so true to me that in life, you'll often come across this, the idea that somebody who was had struggled mightily with, say, very serious drug addiction will kind of get religion and will become as devoted to the religion as they were to the drugs, because the religion is saving them from the drugs. And I feel like Cossiter is somebody like that. He's lived this life of horrific violence and just brutality, and there's no empathy. He's kind of a sociopath, really. But he
yes,
realizes that he's damned. And so he's become a true believer in the emperor, right? In we have to talk about him too, of course. But so yeah, what did you think of good old Captain Cossiter?
also, it was interesting to notice how Mimara, when she used her judging eye, it seemed as though, as damned as every one of those skin eaters were, he seemed to be the most damned of all of them, the way that she
Oh
saw
yeah.
him.
Yeah.
And also we got the understanding from Sarl telling her that Kellus found him in the Unification Wars and
Right.
picked him out. And it's like,
As a
okay,
tool, like he uses
yeah,
everyone else.
yeah.
It's a tool.
Like, why would Kellis use this guy? Like, what's the deal? What's going on?
Well, apparently Kellis already realized that Acamian would be coming after that
Mm-hmm.
map. And the
Mm-hmm.
whole thing, poor Acamian realizes, oh, I've been completely outmatched again. Like Kelhus was playing four-dimensional chess while I was playing tiddlywinks
Oh,
here.
yes.
But that perspective was conveyed so powerfully through Sarl, who really believes that he's still, with the cat. He's so loyal and devoted to Cossiter. And a lot of that probably was his sergeant back in the wars, right? When Kelhus first noticed these guys and thought, yeah, I can use them.
Mm.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. I that was such a I didn't see that coming. I did not see him being a Zuandan. What is it? A
oh
true
yeah,
believer.
Zaudani or what? Yeah, the
Zandani. Yeah.
zealots. Yeah, yeah,
Yes. I didn't see that coming at all.
yeah,
I really thought they were kind of on the same side, sort of, sort of. I
yeah.
feel like something I saw a lot in this book, and we could talk about it in other storylines too, is there's that idea in fantasy of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And
Yeah.
in this story, you see a lot of people pairing up the enemy of my enemy, but it's not necessarily going to go the way that they planned. It's not necessary. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be friends at the end of the day.
Like the skin spy, for example, who ends up saving. Now, I wanted to
Yeah.
ask you, so the skin spy ends up saving Mimara and ultimately pleading for her to kill it. Kill me, just end it. Now, maybe it wants to avoid some torture or something. I don't know. Why do you think there are a couple possible answers I can think of, but I also wondered if you felt in any way that this reflected an actual, like, we're supposed to think that these things are just vessels, that they're not really, they don't have a soul, that kind of thing.
Mm.
um are we supposed to think that it actually might have the capacity for, like, I don't know, like, does it care for her? Is that why it saves her? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't really have a theory for that, but I want to hear yours. What do you think?
I haven't made up my mind, to be honest with you. I just can't make up my mind on this. Like, what is Baker doing here with this skin spy? Because they're supposed to be, now it could be the case that it's just because it did meet up with its boss there, the bird with the human head on it and all of that earlier, and it got its orders, and for some reason it's been meant to protect her and Akamian. Perhaps because that the ultimate plan is to defeat Kelhus, and they think that Akamian is obviously working in opposition to Kelhus. So maybe it is helping Akamian and Mimara because it thinks they're going to do damage to Kelhus.
That
But
would make sense.
that makes
Mhm.
sense. But I also wondered, did this thing actually, like, on some level, love Mimara, or did it have
Mm.
feelings of not necessarily romantic love, but of a kind of um, a compassion? Did it try to save her for any altruistic reasons at all? I found myself wondering that. Now maybe I'm just way off here and wishful thinking because it's such a bleak, terrible world that I want something positive to come out of this. But I just couldn't help thinking, did this thing actually want to help because it was just being good in that moment? Are we seeing a capacity for good in this creature that we're meant to think is just completely just evil and lustful and just a killing lust machine or something. So I
Yeah,
don't.
it's such a good question. What is the deal with the skin spy?
Yeah.
I had major question marks about that too. I also noticed that there was a scene earlier in the book when Mimara came across the skin spy, Nonasoma, in the woods, and he took on her form, but he took on her form as she looks later in the book with her hair cut off and her belly much more round,
Yeah.
like her, far more pregnant. So,
Yeah, and her pregnancy seemed to be a factor there too, right? It
oh
it thought
yeah.
of her differently once she was pregnant. Did you notice that?
Maybe. I didn't notice it, but
Okay.
it could be a factor.
Well, she was pregnant the whole time it knew her, I guess, but I felt like that was a factor in how it related to her, the fact that she was pregnant. But again, I'm not entirely sure. So a lot of questions around the skin spy and its role in that particular thread. But poor Akamian and what are your thoughts on Akamian and Mimara? Because they're really the main show here in this section.
Ugh,
Either one you want to talk about?
so complicated, their dynamic.
Yeah,
I
father daughter or husband wife or what here?
I think I mean, in my mind, and Baker can prove me wrong, but in my mind, I feel as though they have decided to take upon the father. Gosh, I don't know.
I think that she's in love with him, and
What?
I think she's in love with him.
I did not pick that up.
I think she is. I think that she wants to think she's in love with him at least, and that she's accepted that this baby is his, and that he's not a father so much as a well, a very old, much older partner for her at this point.
Hmm. Yeah.
I don't think he's quite there. I don't think he's accepted that perspective, but obviously it occurs to him because I mean, he is the father of the child, it seems. That seems very definite. And so it might be just like a matter of, okay, you're gonna have my kid, so I guess we'll be a couple now, maybe, which is, given that he felt so fatherly toward her earlier, it's kind of messed up, honestly.
Yeah.
Well, but she
He
looks
kept
like her mother too, and that's part of this whole dynamic, right? So I don't.
Yes, he definitely takes on a more protective role when it comes to
Uh,
her. And there is a passage where she is talking about that, like talking about how I guess he is maybe seeing her more as a lover. And then she said, but lovers don't, or father. He's looking at her more like a father figure. And she said, but fathers don't lie with their daughters. She says that line in her
Pretty
mind.
direct, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and then but she still allows him to shelter her as they go to sleep, like
yeah,
put his arm around her. So I think she's conflicted about that dynamic, but I think that they both just agreed with um unnormal their circumstances are, that they are just going to go ahead and take on an abnormal dynamic and
yes,
be there for each other in some way. I don't think the roles are clear as far as that's concerned, but I
no,
did find their dynamic very interesting, especially the moments when she was asking him questions and asking him about why he fell in love with her mother. And
yeah,
it seemed, I loved that part too, because I got the sense that he fell in love with Esmenet not just because of her beauty, but also because of her curiosity, her
yes,
mind, and the fact she kept asking him questions. And his weakness is he
yeah,
is a teacher. He is a teacher at heart. That is something in his identity that comes through over and over again, is he has the soul of a teacher. So he loves the fact that he's asked so many questions, that this woman wants to know the world. And as we know from book one in the first trilogy, Esmenet as a whore, that's the way she tries to know the world or understand the world outside of herself, is by through the men she sleeps with. So it seems like it was kind of the perfect recipe that they would end up falling for each other, Esmenet and Akamian. But
yeah,
then it also adds a weird layer when Mimara comes along. She looks just like her mother, and she's begging him to teach her. So
yeah,
it's just an interesting, egotistical, like exploration as far as Akamian's concerned, I think.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, I would say
and
so.
yeah, and there were so many interesting passages about Mimara too, and her conflicts when her mother ended up having all of the men who had, who had had her as a whore. She had them slaughtered, and she did not feel comfortable about that. She actually
Right.
felt some sort of security in her identity as a prostitute, and so to let that go, to look down on the men who had her, there was some identity crisis there. Did you get the sense of that?
Yeah. Oh, she felt that there was some overkill there, quite
Yes.
literally, as a response. But she uses that as well at times to say, "Hey, you should be afraid of my mother. Look what she did back in, when she found me, But yeah, she's a very complex, probably the most fascinating character in this book, I think, is Mimara in many ways.
She is so fascinating. I think it's hard because since she was a baby, since she was, well, not a baby, but since she was a child, that was her identity. That was her role in society. That's all she knew of herself, was
Yeah.
to be a sex slave. And I mean, she doesn't understand life beyond that. So it just feels like her normal mode of thinking, her normal mode of operating. And I think she's starting to find other aspects of herself on this crazy journey,
Yeah.
which is so fascinating to see. But one thing that I was kind of grossed out about, I wondered if you caught it, but there was an exchange that she had with a Kamian, I think. I think it was with a Kamian. And she talked about how she escaped Momin because she was there with Esmenet, and she ran away. And one of the ways she ran away was by sleeping with the guard Imhalis.
Yeah, who also has been sleeping with her mother.
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah. I
her
mean,
mother
that's
took comfort in him. Yeah.
the unfortunate thing is that she has learned that that is one way to get power. over men.
Yes.
And this is a world where I read Prince of Nothing trilogy, and I thought, boy, this world is bleak. And it really sucks to be somebody who is disempowered in this world, especially because this is a world of predators and prey, and that's it. And there's nothing else. And if you're not a predator, you're a prey. And women in Prince of Nothing were all prey. There was not a single woman in Prince of Nothing that I felt like, oh yeah, she's except for the okay, there was the mother of the emperor, but she was just gross and horrible. So I'm not counting her.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Uh, but here in this series, one thing that I really appreciate is we'll talk about Esmenet later because she's also a very important in this conversation. But with Mimara, I really felt that Bakker was doing something interesting with her arc in here, particularly at the end when Galleon and the other two remaining skin changer guys are about to do something horrible to her. And her judging eye opens and she tells, as we said earlier, Galleon, I forgive you. And I feel like in that moment, she has taken, in a way, she's disempowered them in a way where, I mean, what they're about to do to her is, yes, it's sexual in nature, but it's also about power, isn't it? It's about taking power over someone in a way that's sick and
Mhm.
horrible and disgusting. And um, she takes that away from them, I think, by seeing them for what they are, seeing them for as the pathetic beings that they are, that they're harmed and they've been through awful stuff and they're damned. And she genuinely expresses a kind of empathy for them in that moment, incredibly. And I feel like she just takes Galleon's mojo away there in that
Mm.
moment. He's determined to still hurt her, but I feel like she's changed the dynamic there in a way that I found to be kind of interesting. I know what did you think of that?
I loved it. I loved it because in that scene, leading up to that scene, when they're all surrounding her, I got the sense of, okay, we're just waiting for a commune to get back over here and save Mimara. And that's not the choice that Baker made.
Right.
Did not have a commune save the girl. She saved herself. At least she had a big part to play. I know that we could say that the skin spy helped out a lot, but I
Yeah.
still feel like she had a huge role to play in her own survival. So I loved that decision personally.
Yeah. I actually felt that it wouldn't be a Camian, or we have to talk about, we haven't even really mentioned yet, um,
Non-men?
the yeah, the non-man. We got to talk about him. We'll do that after this. But I felt that the skin spy was going to come and help in that moment, and I wasn't wrong. But what I didn't predict was that the skin spy was the one remaining stone hag in the group. That guy who was constantly like just keeping up, and he was always
Cole? Was
watching
it
from the.
Cole?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was the one remaining one who's like almost like forgotten he was there, and he it turned out to be the skin spy, which makes complete sense, actually. I don't know
I
why I
was
didn't see that.
wondering about that particular guy too, because I don't know if I am remembering this incorrectly, and somebody can correct me in the comments, I'm sure. But I thought that I read a passage in which Cole was the one of them that didn't consume the Curie.
Well,
And
they
I
didn't give it
wondered
to
if,
any of the stone hags. Yeah, they
oh, they
excluded
didn't?
the stone hags from the Curie. Yeah,
Oh,
the
okay.
entire time. Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. I thought he stood out as one. I guess I thought they were consuming it.
Well,
So
he
maybe,
was the last of them, so yeah, he would have been watching from the outskirts as they were doing their nightly ritual, where the non-man who had the Kyrie in his pouch, which turned out to be the ashes of a non-man king, is giving them their little finger of Kyrie.
yeah, that was,
I mean, it is quite something how they ritualize that as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
It turned a
So.
little erotic at sometimes too, the way it was
Oh, in a
described.
big way. And Mimara tried to use that too. Now that's very dangerous, of course, because in this case, if he starts really caring about you, he's going to kill you, right?
Mhm.
That's his deal, right?
Yes.
So thoughts on our non-man friend here, who turns out to be the king that Kelhus is looking to negotiate with. right?
Nilgicus is, I think, is the name of him.
Milkikus, yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
how you say it. Turns out to
Yes.
be him, and Kelhus thinks he's going to be negotiating. He sent his daughter and son, and also Sorwheel, to be
Mhm.
hostages so that Nilgikus can become an ally. Well, wait, he's over here with Acamian, so it seems like Kelhus is getting deceived there if he thinks he's dealing with Nilgikus, right?
Yes, I was so excited. I was hoping we'd get an intersection with all of those characters,
Yeah,
which didn't quite happen. But yes, I found Nilgicus so fascinating because I mean he's described as being very strange looking. The fused teeth, as we talked about last time, uh, strange character. And Akamian talks to Mimar earlier in the story about how he's not human in the same way. He doesn't have he's not doesn't have a self in the same way because
right,
he doesn't have his memories, which is how we understand self. So there's a conversation about that. I and obviously he was working with this there was like this transaction between Nilgicus and the captain, in which the captain would give him memories,
right,
and in return, Nilgicus would give the captain power.
yeah,
And we know the captain is working for Kellis by the end, but it was, and I also have questions about the captain too because I don't know. There was a part that made me a little confused. Maybe I'll put that on pause though. Um, but I don't know if how you felt about him, but I oddly liked him. I know
Nilgikus,
that there were some pretty gross scenes with him giving the Curie away and all that, but
right.
for some reason, I just never felt like he was as bad as the others. And I also loved the part when Akamian talked about how he feared him because he didn't know when the time came if he would be able to kill him.
Right,
Because if he was the last of his kind or he has so much he represents so much history.
right.
It almost be like killing a dinosaur or something along those lines.
Yeah. No, I think what Baker's done is kind of brilliant here. He's taken the whole trope of elves and he's basically asked the question, if you were a being that had lived for thousands and thousands of years, what would the nature of your memories be? What would the nature of your identity be? And given the many losses that you would experience during those thousands of years, what kind of mental state would you be in? And he gives us an answer here in Neil Gickus, in this character who's got so many holes in his memory just by virtue of being around for so long and living through so much trauma. And I feel like he isn't evil per se in the way that maybe Cossiter is or something like that, but he's nevertheless very very dangerous, and his idea that once he cares about someone he has to kill them is it's a bit worrying. I wouldn't want to be near him, that's for sure. But yeah, I feel that he's not, I agree with you, he's not just, I wouldn't dismiss him as just an evil being, but he's kind of the logical consequence of a creature that is that long lived. I think is that kind of in and out of it feels like he's someone like if you've ever been around someone, an elderly person near the end of their life, and they're constantly in and out of, like, at one moment they know who they are and they're coherent, and another moment they're just adrift somewhere, and he's a lot like that, isn't he? And it kind of makes sense. So yeah, there's part of me that feels for him, but I also, in a way that you might feel for, I don't know, a wounded lion that's lying next to you. It's like, yikes, and he turns out to be very dangerous there at the end. And I don't know. Well, another part that I felt was a bit of a letdown was how he dies. That it just seemed way too easy for a Camian in that final moment to bring him down. And then they make ashes out of him and they have more Kiri. I was like, really? Uh,
Oh, goodness. Yeah, um I found that pretty heartbreaking too because at the end he and Akamian defeat that dragon together,
Together,
the father
yeah.
of dragons. It seemed like they are allying at that point, and then when the dragon is free, Akamian is so excited, he's so fired up. He's like, "This is a tale for the sagas." And as soon as he's excited, he looks at Nilgicus, and Nilgicus says I know no glory because I can't, that his memory or lack of memory is such that he
Right.
can never know glory. He can never know triumph.
I'm
He
gonna
says, I
forget
only
this.
know betrayal. I only know heartbreak. And then he starts going crazy and then they start fighting.
Yep.
And then it seemed to me like the way he died, like you said, it did seem a little easy. I got the impression that Akamian didn't really want to kill him. And
Right.
Akamian used a certain blow, a certain type of magic that really shouldn't have killed him, but it was more I got the impression, if I understood this part correctly, that it was more like the timing of the blow and the exact placement of the blow and where he was located that it caused him to be knocked out. And then Akamiya comes up to him and he doesn't even remember. He said, What happened? What was going on?" And then Akamiya said, "You found glory." And then he dies.
Yeah. 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 It was quite an arc. And I think I mean, he's been turned into ash, so he's genuinely gone at this
Hmm.
point. So that is something that I'm sure that even Kelhus did not anticipate was Neil Gigas dying that way or even being there necessarily. I mean, I have to think, okay, Kelhus is employing Cossiter. Does he know that Neil Gigas is the non-man who's with Cossiter or not? You would think that's something that Kelhus would know, right? But I don't know. Because he sent his daughters, Sarah, and his son, Moengus, to be hostages to the same person, but he sent them to a place that it seems like they're actually those other non-men are secretly allied with Golgotharoth, I think, with the
I
enemy.
was so confused about that
I feel
because it
like
did
that's what's
seem that
happening
way.
here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that they're playing they're ready to stab Kellis in the back, I feel like, but I don't know. So we'll see, I guess.
Yeah, I guess we'll find out. That was ambiguous to me,
Yeah,
personally. Yeah.
not entirely clear, but I did get the kind of a bad feeling about it.
Mhm.
So speaking of which, I guess let's talk about that part of the narrative. We've got the Great Ordeal, which Kelhos is leading. We don't get a lot of scenes with Kelhos, but some intimate scenes with him and Proyas, which I thought were really good scenes.
Mm.
And then we got to talk about Sorgwheel and him being selected as a hostage to go with Sarah and Moengus. So let's start with the Great Ordeal. Any thoughts on that, or any of the scenes that we talked about the battles already a little bit, but what would you like to talk about in relation to that?
Um, I I just I felt as though Sorwheel's character continued to evolve in this story.
Hmm.
He transformed quite a bit from and talking about memory, there was a whole passage about how the memory that he had when he was reflecting back on his last day in Sarkarapis, if I'm saying the place where
I
he's
think that's
from.
right. Yeah.
Thank you. He was remembering the final day, the fall of that, and he felt like the burn, the sting of those memories was no longer there. And he
Yeah.
starts to have a transformation in his mind. And I think Zoranga is largely responsible for that as well. There's a
Yeah.
lot between that dynamic of Zoranga and Sorwheel that we could talk about. But
Absolutely.
yeah, it seemed as though we went from Zoranga being kind of I don't want to say mentor figure, but someone that
A more
is
dominant
Sorbian,
friend.
yeah,
Yeah.
more dominant.
Yeah.
Even though they come from very different cultures and backgrounds, it seemed like Soranga still reflected some of the values that Sorwheel aspired towards, some of the ideas of honor, and especially that of his father and ancestors, especially as the Zuaim tribe are all about their ancestors, all about honoring their fathers. That's the most important thing to them.
Yep.
So I think that it was interesting that he was this figure that was more dominant to this battle that occurs in which he turns his back, apparently
Months.
commits an act of cowardice,
Yeah.
which Sorwheel doesn't see it that way, but Zoranga does. And Zoranga puts himself in Sorwheel's shadow. And he decides that Sorwheel, chosen by Yatwur, is going to be the chosen one, so to speak. I feel like Sorwheel is being put in this idea of chosen one to avenge his father,
Yep.
chosen one to murder Kellis. And then I think as a result of all that, and as a result of memory changing, the pains of of his past memories changing, Sorgwheel starts to recontextualize the way that he looks at past events and the way he looks at himself and the situation. So
Right.
rather than feeling completely awkward and burdened and uncomfortable, which he still is, and he's still put in situations where he feels completely out of place and awkward, especially as Cayutas honors him for calling Sarah away. There's a strange dynamic there about we're going to send word to your kingdom about how you're this great noble king. Now kill your slave. Like there's just some strange dynamics,
Oh, they're
power plays
using
there.
him. They're using
Mhm.
him.
Oh
And
yeah.
there's a clear message too. They want it's
Mhm.
a propaganda move. They're
Mhm.
basically Coyotes is saying, yeah, yeah, we're sending this message that you're a great hero for us now. So his kingdom will be behind them, rather than enemies. They're it's pure propaganda. They're using this poor kid. Yeah.
And I think even admits as much
Pretty
too. He says
much.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But at the same time, Surreal secretly in his mind is starting to see that maybe maybe it wasn't maybe he hasn't been as dishonorable. Maybe
Yeah.
what Soranga even did was the more quote unquote sensible thing to do. And he starts to recontextualize the way he sees all these events and see everything leading up to what Yatwar choosing him and him taking on this role, taking
Yeah.
power in his own way.
Yeah, it's interesting because he does have his moment of sort of empowerment when he goes back for Escalese as they're being chased by the Stronk, and he is responsible for Escalese sending up the warning so that they're not taken from behind the Great Ordeal by the other Stronk army, the Swarm or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
And that's a key moment, but he also kind of undercuts that by later thinking, I'm only getting this treatment, I'm only being uh, lionized here because Yachtware is putting me forward. I'm being used, in other words. Everything I do is not me. I'm being used by all these bigger, more powerful entities. And I feel like he is, in a way, expressing the human condition in that respect, that we are powerless, tiny little mites that have very little say in what really is going on with us. And this is, I think, part of Baker's ongoing dialogue about free will or the lack thereof. So Sorwheel, I feel really bad for. And then, of course, he is selected to be one of these hostages, which takes him away from his plan. I feel like Kelos is 2 or 3 steps ahead here, maybe even more, 10 steps ahead or whatever. Does he know that Sorwheel is Yachtware's intended assassin for him? I don't know, but sending him away as a hostage is a convenient way to disarm him, isn't it? He even has to ditch his what are those balls? Those iron balls or whatever they're called, the tears of God or whatever.
Oh, the Kore?
Yeah, the Korai. Yeah,
Yeah.
he has to ditch his Korai. He has to give it to Zoranga because he can't travel with Sarah with that
Yeah, that's
thing,
right.
right?
Mhm.
So he's basically disarmed. His means of assassinating Kellis, even his proximity to him, are taken away. And he's gone off with Sarah and Moengus, who turn out to be very affectionate siblings.
Yes.
Now they
Yeah, I
do,
mean,
of course, they aren't actually blood siblings, I guess.
no, and he
So,
knows that too. I guess
yeah,
everyone knows
I
that.
think everyone knows it's sort of an open thing, but
I mean, do they know? I guess they
they
know
know.
that they're
They
not
know.
real siblings.
Oh yeah, Sarah says he's the son. She tells Sorreal, Moengus is not really my brother. He's the son of this. You heard of this barbarian dude, named Nair? Yeah,
But
that's his real
but does
father.
she know did she know in that scene that he was a son? Yeah, did he I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
yeah.
She even says his real parent, his biological parents are Serway, who I'm named after,
Yes. Mhm.
and Nair. So they know they're not blood
Oh,
siblings.
okay. Yeah.
But
It's just
yeah.
awkward.
I mean,
It
poor Starwheel stumbles upon all of this and he doesn't know what to do.
No, but you're right, though. He does have some really powerful insights, especially in
Yeah,
the first half of the book about humanity in general, about human nature, and this whole idea of this conquest being
yeah,
pure hubris in a sense. And I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I found it really interesting, by the way that he had these strong feelings for Sarah Ray, even feared for her more than himself at one point.
Right.
And at the same time, he despises her and he decides to hate her. There's
Yeah.
some weird conversation about that. I wasn't sure what's going on with his character.
I
I
also got the impression, I wanted to know your thoughts, but what about her actually showing moments of vulnerability and compassion herself?
yeah.
Was that just an act to get him to go
Hmm.
along, or is that genuine? Is she a total like Kelhus? Is she what are his people called? The oh
Junye?
gosh. Yeah, Dunyang. Is she a total Dunyang, or does she actually have from her mother maybe the capacity for compassion? I actually think maybe she actually Sarah has some real compassion in there. That some of her arrogance is an act. That there's a part of her, at least, that recognizes Sorwheel's humanity and feels bad about what they're doing to him, perhaps. But there's also this part of her that feels like, yeah, I mean, poor thing. All of these kids, everyone around Kelhus is basically just a tool that he's using. I feel like, and they're playing that role, but I feel like there has to be some resentment from his kids realizing I'm just a tool for dad here, right? You would
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, it makes you wonder. It makes you wonder. I wondered about that as well, because on the one hand, there were times when she didn't worry about things. She seemed to have this lack of worry,
Right,
and she said, "Why should I worry? We're children of fate. What's there to worry about?"
right.
And then she wakes up from a dream because she has dreams like the mandate, right? Like the school, the sorcerer's dream.
Yes,
She has
because she's
these
using
dreams
the
of
same
this.
magic, the Gnostic magic or whatever. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So she has dreams of the first apocalypse, and she ends up waking up crying at one point,
right.
and Mingus ends up comforting her. So
Yes, yes. Yeah. Even the relationship between her and Moengus, I feel like it could be them just trying to take comfort where they can get it. Can you imagine growing up Kelhus's kid and just feeling like zero affection from this dude and feeling like, if I were just a little bit crazier, like one of my brothers, I probably would be just locked up and thrown away. Basically, they're just tools for him. So I think there's some humanity is where I'm coming down at the moment, at least. Is that Sarah, there is some humanity in her, and that fear, that empathy, that weakness, that vulnerability is genuine in her.
she is a powerful, powerful character too.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
what did you think about that? About these flying nuns with their swirling silk skirts or whatever?
Again, this dude Calhus, it all comes back to him at the end, doesn't it? I can't make up my mind how much I don't like him or whether I do, because he's done some things that, from my perspective, have improved this world. Like he's allowed women to pursue magic. Great. Why did he do it? To be altruistic and stop the patriarchy, or to simply get more tools in his toolbox? And I feel like it's probably the latter, but it's hard to say. But yeah, I mean, there's a recognition finally. Yeah, women can use magic just like men can. They don't have to be, as ground into the dirt as they seem to be in this world, as we saw in Prince of Nothing. So I like it. I like this development. Obviously, there's a lot of resentment, like they're witches and women aren't supposed to, have this kind of power. And there's a lot of, resentment, even as the men are kind of attracted and disgusted with them because of their own attraction. The men are projecting a lot onto the women, right? They're attracted to the women and they fear that loss of power. They feel there's a fear, I think, in a lot of times in men who are attracted to women and want to assert their power, and they do it by being brutes. You know what I mean?
And I think that Sorwheel is doing that as well with his
Yeah.
feelings for
Oh,
her.
yes. Very
Yeah.
much so. Yeah. Very much so.
And he even recognizes it. He recognizes that this is what he's doing, which is
Yeah.
interesting.
Very complex character. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
Sorgwheel is forced to kill his Horsparian, his slave, but that was quite a moment when Horsparian
Mm.
just lunges onto the spear himself,
I
right?
like that. I had a feeling that the slave was gonna kill himself.
Yeah.
I had a feeling about it.
And it says something about Sorgwheel that he was incapable of doing it.
Yeah.
He
Yeah,
didn't
he didn't
want to
want
do that.
to.
right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
instead of feeling used by Yatware and confused about what he's going to do, I mean, he keeps recognizing he's so clearly not a believer king. Um,
Mhm.
and Serwa and Moingus recognize that very well. But at the same time, he has serious doubts about this mission he's been given by Yatware. Like, but wait, he's actually doing the right thing. Kelhus, the Aspect Emperor, is going after the consult. He's killing thousands and thousands of Srank. He's saving humanity. Am I in the right here by trying to be his assassin?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's what I mean by the enemy of my enemy. Like how that relationship is so complicated in this story.
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, Kellis is on the side of mankind. You could argue he is a savior on the one hand. On
Yeah,
the
and
other
even if he's a
hand,
jerk, I mean, he's saving humanity, right? So,
yeah. On the other hand, what is his final agenda?
right.
What then? What's
We
he's
don't know what it is, and all we do know that the Dunyain are all gone. Because at the very end, when Akamian and Mimara finally make it there, it's sacked, it's ruined. There's nobody there,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So just that, I
Oh,
mean, what's
yeah.
the deal with Ishual, right? I mean, that was supposed to be if Kalhus is acting on behalf of Ishual, some mission he was given. They sent him out into the world in order to achieve this, you know, getting the three C's behind him to fight the consult, whatever it might be. What happened to Ishual? Right? That it feels like the consult is ahead of the game, maybe here. I don't know.
Yeah.
Both both by the fact that they have the non-men on their side potentially, and the fact that Ishual is destroyed, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know. Scary.
I'm curious about that. I mean, I know we left off with them seeing it in ruins, but I also wonder if the next book we're going to find more there, if there are going to be any clues to that as to what happened.
What happened to all the other Dunyain? Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Yikes. And if something is powerful enough to wipe out all the Dunyain, it must be pretty darn powerful, right?
It has to be. Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So we had one other major thread to talk about, and that is the what I think of as the Esmenet thread, but it really involves her children. It involves Maithanet and quite a few other interlocking, plot elements there. Her children, basically Kalmomus, but also she loses another son in this book, doesn't she?
That
Uh,
was possibly my favorite scene. This is probably my favorite storyline in the whole story. I
okay,
loved
well,
Edmund.
tell me what you think, or what do you want to start on? That scene with
Right.
Maithanet and what's his name
In
in
Realitas.
Realitas.
In
That
Realitas.
scene,
Yeah,
so
sure.
much tension.
Oh my goodness. That whole scene, I loved it. In Realitas, to me, reminded me quite a bit of, have you ever seen Silence of the Lambs?
Yeah.
He reminded me of a combination between Hannibal Lecter and Buffalo Bill. Like, if you
Huh.
put the 2 together, that's in Realitas.
Yeah. But also tortured. I mean, he is the one who he has his father's talent for seeing into people and knowing them, but he also has his mother's compassion. And those two things together are apparently a really bad combination, right? That lead to his madness, his inability to cope with the world.
He sees too much is the idea I got. Like, he
Yeah,
just sees way too far into
yeah,
the outside, into all the metaphysical realms.
yeah,
It's made his brain just malfunction. He can't function like a normal human being. So he has
yeah.
to be chained up.
Did you think that his confrontation with Mathanet was just an elaborate kind of suicide? Is that what he was really trying to achieve there? Just end it all in a gamble? I mean, because what would have happened if he had succeeded, right?
Yeah. I asked myself the same question,
Hmm,
and it's possible. It's possible that that was his plan all along, was to die by suicide. But at the same time, he obviously wanted to bring everyone down with him. He wanted to cause all that chaos before he left. Otherwise, I mean, he filed down the chain, right? Which is what gave him that ability to strangle Maithanet, or
Right.
to try to strangle
Try to.
Maithanet.
Yeah.
And he had that file because of Kelmomus, who left
Right.
that for him. And he could have, I mean, I think he could have just used that file and killed him, died by suicide earlier in the book, perhaps, if he
Right.
didn't want to cause all that chaos.
Right.
Where I was left wondering was whether he was ultimately betraying Kelmomus, or whether
Well, I
he
mean,
was,
he does too, because he tells
yeah.
him that, by the way, Kelmomus is not what he seems.
And then
And
he proceeds to try to strangle Maithanet. So
yeah,
there was
yeah,
some ambiguity about that.
absolutely. So
I
much so good.
loved that scene though. It was so tense. It was
Yeah.
so tense. And to see it through Kelmomus's perspective. I find Kelmomus a fascinating character
Oh,
in this
he's so
story.
loathsome. I can't stand Kelmomus. He's such a sociopathic
Oh, he's
chaos
horrible.
monkey.
He's horrible.
He's a sociopathic chaos monkey, is but and he's horrible. And at the same time, I was kind of rooting for him as he's surviving in the palace and poking people in the eye from the 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 vents and
Ugh,
everything else. I mean, he's
and eating human corpses and
yeah.
crying for his mommy. Yeah,
I
I
guess it's better than
hate
eating
this.
strong, which is what they're doing on the Great Ordeal now, right?
Yeah, but the problem is, with Enrilitus is that in the meeting he had with Kelmomus, preceding the
The
meeting with
first
Nathan,
meeting, yeah,
in the first meeting, the one, "Do you shit where you shit?" That scene, goodness, the smearing his feces on the ground. He he makes, Kelmomus aware that maybe Kelmomus doesn't really love his mommy, that
right,
maybe it's all about power for him, and it
right.
changes his whole entire concept of whether he really needs Esmenet to be alive. So I actually fear for Esmenet's life now.
Oh my
Now
goodness,
that,
for multiple reasons, but yeah, that and Realitas sees the two. He sees not just Kalmomas, but Sammy's in there too, or one of
Marmus,
his other
yeah.
voices, his dual voices. Just brilliant stuff. Creepy as hell, but really brilliant stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely brilliant scene though. I love how everything led up to that showdown. Ah, I think that just took my breath away. It was so fascinating and it was
Yeah.
so tragic, especially because it makes you wonder too. I mean, obviously Esmenet was suspicious of Maithanet because of Kelmomus, but do you think Maithanet was, I mean, was he her friend? Was he
I
harmless?
think Nathan is just trying to do a job that his brother gave him, and it's kind of a
Yeah.
crappy job.
I don't
But
think he had anything to do with Yatwar though. So
nothing whatsoever. I think
no.
Nathan is kind of framed actually, but he's a powerful entity, and it's logical. I'm sure now. Obviously, actually, Kelhus knows. He even says, I don't know how he knows this, but he said, "My brother has seized power." Now, he had said before that he'd cut off all communication with Momin and with Home, right? But obviously, that can't be entirely true if he knows that Nathanet has seized power from Esmenet. But I feel like Mathanet's hand was kind of forced, ultimately by Kelmomus, who was acting through in Realitas. I think Mathanet's hand was forced in that situation. That he didn't want to, and he was puzzled by the fact that Kelhus left Esmenet in power, and was wondering himself, does he not trust me? What's going on here? I felt, I don't know, slightly bad for Mathanet in all of
Oh
this.
yeah.
Yeah,
I felt bad for Mathanet too. And I love the scene though when Irulitus ends up strangling him, because Irulitus gets to him through truth, through a Dunyan way,
yeah,
because they test each other. They have this fight of the minds first,
right,
and then Irulitus throws Mathanet off for a minute because he says, "I don't know why Esmenet," and then Irulitus says, "Oh, you think Esmenet or Mom or whatever set this up?" And he says, "What?" And he says, and that's when he reveals Calmomus. He fools him with the truth that he
right,
didn't see. And the
right.
moment he sees it is the moment he's caught off guard. So I love the way that the Dunyan play of minds was happening in that scene.
All I know is I
Loved
don't want to be a Dunyan.
it. Incredible writing, though.
Yeah.
Incredible writing. And then poor Esmenet. I guess she did truly love and Enrealitus. It did make me wonder for
Yeah.
a while there. I think one of the hard questions that Baker seems to explore with Esmenet's character is her desire not only to be a mother, but to be a mother of children who love her.
Yeah.
It's not
Oh,
enough to just be a
yes.
mother and love your children. It's that need to have your children love you.
He is exploring in a way that makes me so uncomfortable the very nature of love itself. Is
Mhm.
love altruistic or is it ultimately selfish in nature?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he's asking these tough questions and looking at things that make us all squirm and say, Baker, stop.
Yeah.
Doing it in such a brilliant way. But yeah, yeah. I mean, it's through her arc that we really explore that question. Is love fundamentally selfish in nature? And what she goes through is horrible, right? And ultimately, though, I mean, it's weird though, because it is that one decision she makes to hire the assassin, right?
Yes.
That just flips things right at
Yes.
that moment. I feel like, okay, everything's good. Now, I actually knew that that assassin was going to do something.
Me
I didn't know
too.
it was going to happen right then, though. And I thought that
I
was
actually
such a
predicted it.
brilliant scene.
I predicted all those things. I predicted they were gonna reconcile things, Esmenet and Mathanet were gonna reconcile things, and I predicted at that exact moment that the assassin would come out and kill him. I
Boom.
don't know why I saw it. Even
Yeah.
though I predicted it, it still hits so hard. It still
Yeah.
hits so hard.
What a scene.
Um,
And then she just seizes everything there. And that's her, okay, that's her moment of kind of, I mean, I feel like she was ready to reconcile with Mathanet and swallow all that pain and that loss, and her son is dead, and okay, let's move on. And then the assassin goes boom, and then she just seizes that moment,
she
and
has to.
she has to, or she's done, and she
Yeah.
has to take control, and all the loyalists and everybody, the politicians, everybody in that room, she wins them over.
Yeah. That's another scene, just like I was saying earlier, how I really appreciated the choice of in which Mimara has such a strong role in her own survival. I feel
Right.
like Esmenet as well, as a
Yeah.
female character, has a very strong role in her own survival, in her own assertion of power. Now, where that's gonna go from here, probably a tragic direction, but I was just proud of her in this book at least.
Yeah, same here. And but the
But
whole
it's
thing,
also tragic too because, ugh, one, she probably could have used Mathanet. She could have learned about Kelmo, Mr. Mathanet. He was gonna tell her at a later time. And
yeah.
another thing, that assassin, are you along the same lines? Do you think the same thing I do, in which maybe the assassin probably works for Yatwer?
Ooh.
Because
Well,
when he introduces himself, he not only gives himself the name, his name means fate. And she says something like, oh, what was it? I wrote it down. There was something, oh yeah, that it's the name that she says, "What kind of name is that? What a horrible name." And he says, that his mother gave him such a name, and he says, "We take such gifts as she gives." And so with that line, it just kind of was a red flag for me. It made
yachtware
me
kind of
wonder. I don't know for
reference.
sure if that's the case, but it did make me think. Is she bargaining
Well,
with the devil?
in that
How
case,
tragic would that be?
the book is called The White Luck Warrior,
Yeah,
right?
I was wondering about that too. Yeah.
And we got those weird scenes where the White Luck Warrior is the
Mm.
POV
Mhm.
at the beginning of chapters, like never a whole chapter, but just these little snippets here and there where we get this incredible POV of this guy looking at himself. It's like he's in the eternal present. He's seeing himself in front of him, he sees himself behind him, and he's seeing the past and the present and the future all at once. And there are certain actions that we feel like he's making his way toward the center of things, toward Momin, perhaps. It's difficult to tell. Um, and you're
I was
asking
yeah, go ahead, sorry.
if this assassin named Fate was in some way connected with Yachtware, we still don't know what the White Luck Warrior is doing here,
True.
right?
No, that was I was expecting more clarity on that. We didn't get
I
it.
mean, the book is called White Luck Warrior, and I don't know who the heck he is or what he's
Yeah,
doing, right?
yeah.
Of course, we do get certain scenes. Um, we didn't mention this earlier, but what's her name has been taken captive by what's his name? So many names here. The priestess of Yachtware. What's her name? Oh gosh.
Um, um,
Old
um,
lady who's now apparently a really hot young lady.
oh yes, Satma
Not
Nana
not a
Fairy.
fairy. Yeah. She's been taken captive. And she's,
Fana her and Fana y'all. Is that the name of the guy?
yeah,
Yes.
the guy from the former, you know, baddies or whatever, and from the Prince of Nothing trilogy. Those people, they're trying to fight back. But seems like she's kind of taking control in that situation. Like he thought he was going to essentially, you know, turn her into a sex slave or something, but she
Mhm.
seems like she's kind of gotten under his skin a little bit there. And that she's the one who's really in control in that situation at this point. So let's see what's coming from that direction as well, I guess. But I'm just confused about the White Luck Warrior. And okay, what's he doing? When is he going to do it? And you know, how's he going about it? So a lot of unknowns in this particular section. A lot of loss too. Like poor Esmenet. There's Imhylas gets beaten to death, and the prostitute that she was with. I can't think that she's got much of a future after betraying Esmenet, and I felt bad for her the whole time. Like she does betray them, but at the same time, they were asking a lot of her, and Hylas wasn't particularly treating her well
No,
either.
he was treating her terribly.
Right.
Um,
Like he could be
I
such a nice softie when it came to Esmenet, but when it came
yeah,
to this poor young
yeah.
prostitute, he was a brute, right? And that's just the world we're looking at here.
It was gross too whenever he and Nari were having sex as the
Right.
setup for the betrayal too. I felt for Esmenet because she was just feeling punished by the whole entire scenario. It, I felt for
And her
Esmenet.
being having been a prostitute herself, it's
Yeah,
like,
I love that too. I actually really liked the scenes when she's with Nari because
right,
it brought her back to her roots, so to speak, and it brought her back to it was also this split view of having been a quote unquote prostitute whore to now being a mother and just seeing how those all conflict and then taking on the role of empress. Like there are all these challenging circles of her identity that are spiraling around. And I think she ultimately does the best she can. It's amazing the way that came together though, because obviously she's hiding, she's pretending to be Nari's mother.
right,
She's trying to stay out of the way while Nari does her business, and then she has to sit there and watch Nari and him Imhalis, and
right.
then watch him get beaten up, beaten to where he's
To a
not even
pulp.
recognizable anymore. And I'm assuming he's dead after that. I
He's
don't think he
dead.
could live after that.
He's done. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's done, and then her walk of shame, which I couldn't help but think about, uh, A Dance with Dragons a little bit with,
Sure.
Cersei's
Yeah.
walk of shame, just being in shackles, half naked, beaten with rocks, almost raped, being yelled at, and ha going from being empress to being considered the most horrific, unloved person in the whole entire city. And
Right.
then when she gets there, then reconciling with Maithanet, but also feeling kind of like a child with the Dunyain, and then
Yeah.
recognizing, oh, this whole empire is just my husband's tool. He
Yeah.
probably doesn't even care about it. To have all these revelations on top of the fact that
It's quite a roller coaster.
her children, so many of her children have died, or one child is alive, but in the castle. There's just so much going on with Esmenet's character that just I felt for her so deeply. I thought she was a fascinating character. Um,
Yeah. Same
I
here.
and I have to say that I know we're talking about Moment right now, but one of the most heartbreaking scenes for me was when Proyas was talking to Kellis and Proyas
Yes.
was asking him, like, "How do you feel? Are you afraid for Esmenet?" And Kellis says something. He says, "Love is for lesser souls."
Yeah. Love is for lesser souls. What is Callus doing with Proyas? Is
Mm.
he using him again just to consolidate the belief and or testing him in some way? Or is there a tiny flicker of humanity in Kelhus that wants to just confess? Yeah, I'm just using you all here. What is he doing with Proyas in these little sessions that they're having together? You can't help but think he has a motive, that he's using Proyas in some like, you know, four-dimensional chess kind of way, but Proyas is just kind of like strung along here the whole time, and he has it's weird because he has doubts, and Kellis sees the doubts. He doesn't even have to say, Kellis just tells him what he's thinking. And he's like, "Yep." And then the the fact that Kellis recognizes his doubts and talks about them with him seems to solidify his faith in some way as well. So what is he doing with Proyas in all those scenes?
It's a good question because he keeps revealing himself through those conversations as well.
Right.
Like there are certain conversations about faith and how people assume, like true believers assume that gods or those that they love, the prophets, are going to uh, just be very simple and behave in simple ways. That
Yeah.
it's like a childish notion to think such. And he says some kind of conversation about there's a reason why people like their prophets dead. I like that conversation quite a bit.
Yeah.
Because Proyas is such a true believer. I mean, he does have doubts, but he's such a true believer. And it's like, why is Kellis revealing himself in that way?
Yeah. Yeah. Is Proyas a noble soul, or is he a sucker?
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't know.
I don't think he has much of a choice either
No,
way.
doesn't feel like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, so many complex and cool and compelling threads in this book.
A lot of really interesting threads. Something that I noticed when I was reading the story too is how many times there would be a certain, I don't know, a certain experience or theme or idea that was presented in one storyline and then it was brought forth in the next storyline, but in a slightly different context.
Yeah,
So, for example, a Kamian feeling defeat, feeling, yeah, he feels like he's been totally defeated, that he should have known better. And then going into the next scene where Esmenet feels defeat.
right.
Or there's also this passage in which that I really loved, and I think this is probably a central theme in the whole second apocalypse. But there was this passage in which Mathanet tells Esmenet whenever they are reconciling, that he tells her something along the lines of men losing themselves in the labyrinth of their thinking, not to seek truth, but to hide from their own selfish motives. And then the next chapter, we go to Mimara, and when she's with the skin eaters, she has this reflection that motives hide themselves in people, that people aren't even aware of the ways in which their own motives hide themselves from themselves. So
Right.
people aren't aware of their own internal motives. It's not that people hide their motives, that's one part, but the motives hide themselves in people
Yep.
because we don't want to see those darker parts that motivate us.
Right. We spend our entire lives deluding ourselves. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Something
So it
along.
is really tragic, and at the same time, I can see what you're talking about the hopeful parts because
I
I don't
mean,
know.
more than previously. We'll put it that way. I haven't seen a ton of hope in Baker's vision here, but I feel like we're getting tiny flickers of possible hope in this one. You
Yeah.
agree with that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and there's true, even though there's question about, like you said, true altruism. I mean, it's very clear that certain characters truly care for themselves. We saw moments of that. We saw, for example, Sorgwheel really cared for his slave. He didn't want to kill him. We saw that Esmenet really cares for her children. She cared for Imhalus too. I don't think she wanted him to die.
Correct.
And we saw that Akamian and and
Mimara?
blanket on her name, Mimara, they care for each other, even though the dynamic is strange and undefined.
Unnormal, as
So
you said. I mean, it's
yeah,
very unnormal. A lot of unnormal in this. Yeah.
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 So I think there are moments of true caring in the story, but
I think
a
so.
lot of tragedy and darkness, and but you can't have, in my opinion, tragedy without and hopelessness without a counterpoint, in my opinion. Like that's you have to have that counterpoint in order to
You're
tell a
right.
story.
You're right. I mean, this just that this series has kind of this big bleakness here and this tiny little light of hope on the other side. So that's a different balance maybe than
Yeah,
some other
it leans
series.
more into the Scudo than the Chiato. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
But
But yeah, it's brilliant and compelling, and I'm completely invested and fascinated, and I really want to see what happens in the last two books. And did we miss anything, Joanna? I'm sure we did, but anything that you want to bring up?
I'm sure that we missed stuff, but that's what I think we're good for now. I mean, I'm sure people could bring up in the comments things that we didn't talk about that they want to talk about. So I
Yeah,
think we
I
did
think we
well.
hit on the most of the big stuff there.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll see what happens with the great ordeal and everything else, all these other threads. It's quite a vision. But yeah, I'm glad I'm reading this series, and I'm glad I get to talk with you about the series as well. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me for this discussion.
Alrighty, and everybody, thank you for watching, and until next time.